Yeah.
Hey,
What's how you doing, man?
good, good. So that we have strikes on Cog Island, as we say. I'm joking. I'm joking.
No, we
It's just,
aren't.
we're just used to it. We're too used to it. How are you?
Oh, well, in this unnerving period of quiet and peace, it's a little hard to do things. It's good actually. I'm getting some work done.
So, okay, you're actually a really good person to ask this question. Before we get into military
Mm,
discussions and the big elephant in the room, Israel, a report from there was a bit concerning today. But before we
mhm,
get into that, I've been asking a lot of guests at this question, but your opinion would matter a lot to me. Is on the Iranian front, there was
mhm,
in the last 3 days a few developments worried me. Number one, reports that they were seeking $5 to $7 a ship, and Oman was counter offering $3.
Five to seven
But if you go
percent per ship.
5 to 7%, yeah, sorry, percent. My bad.
Right.
Yeah. 5 to 7%.
Hmm.
Oman was offering a counter offer of 3%. But if you
Hmm.
compare to what other straits and canals, they're like 0.1, 0.5%.
Yeah.
I think zero point 0.1, most of them like between 0.1, 0.2.
Hmm.
So when you look at the fee being 2, 3, 4, 500 times more other canals, that's
Hmm.
red flag number one. And I'll tell you why I call it a red flag. Red flag number two, there's a law they're trying to pass through Parliament. It was reported by Fars News 2 or 3 days ago that they want to have the ability to control who goes through the Strait of Hormuz, as in any country that attacked Iran that doesn't pay reparations, so US, Israel, I assume, cannot
Hmm.
go through the straits until they pay reparations. Any country that attacks the axis of resistance cannot use the straits. Any country that assisted with the war, I think, cannot use the straits or something along those lines. So they're starting to put restrictions on who could use the straits. I'm not saying it's not
Right.
justified, but this breaks all international laws and norms. And then today, the Iranian Supreme National Security Council put out a statement saying they will not even open the strait at all until threats stop. Fine,
Hmm.
the war stops in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Iran, and Palestine. War and aggression stops in all these countries, including Palestine.
Hmm.
Um, U.S. lifts its naval blockade. Fine. The U.S. pays damages for the two wars, this one and the last one.
Hmm.
Um, all sanctions are lifted. Sorry, all sanctions are lifted, and release of the frozen assets. The paying the damages and no aggression or wars in Palestine just seems
Hmm.
very difficult to achieve. So my question to you is, um, do you think this is Iran being a good negotiator, or are these genuine demands? And if they are, do they really think they can get those demands, or is that a negotiating position? Or worst case scenario, are they intentionally trying to drag the US back into war for whatever reason?
To be quite honest, they are extremely maximalist demands, right? This is if what they ever dreamed of could fall from the sky, this is exactly what they would want. They would want this information to come out. They want every one of every group that has ever done business with Iran that's considered the the axis of resistance, the Mukawama, to reap the benefits of Iran's ability to squeeze juice out of the West, right? That's maximalist, especially throwing, Gaza, West Bank, all of Palestine, which every major group has done, right? Iraq, Syria, everybody drags in the Palestinians as part of the negotiated settlement, even though they couldn't care less. But then on the other hand, the other things that they've asked for are things that they've gotten before, right? They want compensation. They want, Iran, if I'm not mistaken, they initially estimated the cost of the war on impact of people who were killed, infrastructure, materials destroyed at 200 billion. Well, in the first MOU, they got 24 billion plus a promise of a $300 billion restitution support economic development package. Well, now they can go for that. They can shoot for the $100 billion of Iranian funds that are frozen. They want that immediately now. And of course, why not? Because they understand what their position is. They have America over a barrel. They know that Trump right now is fully bluffing. Iran, the United States holds no cards, none. Air power, we've already proven air power has reached its absolute limit in Iran. You could bomb for the next year and you wouldn't do anything to change the Iranian government's will. You could kill half the leadership and it wouldn't change the calculations on the ground. Sea power has now reached its absolute limit in Iran, principally because the United States has taken this campaign with an attitude that no U.S. service member can die, that there can be no risk, and that the risk must be absolutely minimized. Now, if I were Fleet Admiral, Central Command Navy, and they said, Malcolm, how would you do this? One, other than one aircraft carrier that we have additionally, we have more forces off Venezuela than we do off of Iran. We have more air power, because it's closer to the United States. But it's almost like this war is an afterthought. The naval campaign was an afterthought. We have like 12 Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers out there, 2 to 3 of which must protect the 2 carriers at all times. We just don't have the resources that we had in like Desert Storm, for example. We can't charge through the Gulf because we don't have the ability to risk the lives of those sailors. So the willpower of the president has been shown to be completely lacking. So naval power has reached its limit. Could we do it? Yeah, we could run back and forth through the Strait of Hormuz, dodging missiles, exchanging gunfire for a year. We might lose 1 or 2 ships. We could lose, 100 or more sailors. And that would show that the United States, they have the ability to blood us and keep us out. But we've reached the limit. The only thing we haven't shown, and your frequent guest, Professor Robert Pape, has said, is we have not shown the limits of ground warfare against Iran. But we have. We will not, absolutely under no circumstances at this point, introduce ground troops to Iran because we know that will cost us bodies. And Trump, don't forget, Trump has this obsession with 13,
Casualties.
the number 13, because of the number that Joe Biden lost, which is why when they went up to 18, he tried to actually roll it back to 14, right? Weird psychology going on there. But
he tried to roll it back by saying these people died during a ceasefire, so they don't count.
Yeah, ceasefire, separate war, right? Not during the first one. We were, I did this massive war and I got the same numbers as Joe Biden lost in one afternoon in Afghanistan. It's weird psychology, but it is part of his egocentric based thinking. So that being the case, then other than taking 6 months, it would take us 6 months to roll up the firepower to get into a position where we could do anything other than an amphibious demonstration, which you and I have talked about several times. A small landing here, a small raid there, coming out with 2 or 3 casualties. We just couldn't do it. And here's another thing. This isn't Desert Storm, right? You do not have friendly countries that would allow you to physically land ground forces. You have no ports in the Persian Gulf where you could bring roll-on, roll-off ship, 20, 30 roll-on, roll-off ships with a brigade's armor and ammunition and food and logistics back there. So that means if you're going to do an operation against Iran, it will have to be done amphibiously from the sea to Chabahar, to Sirik, to Bandar Ajaz. And then you've got to sustain from there because the Emirates isn't going to let you do it. The Qataris aren't going to let you do it. You can't even get up to Qatar, right? Your merchant ships are carrying your roll-on, roll-off ships, maybe the ships that get sunk as they're going through the Strait of Hormuz. So you're going to take the risk of, losing $250 million worth of mechanized infantry material. These are the things that show the limits of America's absolute power. The reason we cannot play these cards anymore is because there was never a strategy in this war. I'll say it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. There was not a strategy. Trump thought this war was going to collapse in a matter of days. I don't know whether he talked to Vladimir Putin or Benjamin Netanyahu or both, but that this was a special military operation and it would just happen overnight. and he would have a new Venezuela, and he would own all the oil in Iran with people cheering his name and raising a Trump Tower, Bandar Abbas, and Trump Tower, Tehran. That is the
Trump Tower, Bandar Abbas.
yeah, because there has to be one at the Strait of Hormuz. Probably be a big statue of him overlooking the Strait of Hormuz, which he would rename the Strait of Trump. These
Trump Tower on
fantasies.
Kasham Island. You should troll him.
No,
You should
that
post
would be the Trump, right? The Trump International Golf Resort, Kesham Island. I mean, come on. It has to compete with the Trump International Golf Course, Dubai. So, as amusing as these little anecdotes that we're making here sound, they are part of the fantasy-based thinking that the White House has been living through. And they have no ability to adapt to the reality of this situation. So, going on to your question, the Iranians understand now they have punished the United States. They showed the United States that they could now, we've at 26 days, I think, since the last, since the second phase of this war started. And they're laughing at us. They're making more Lego videos, newer Lego videos. So the United States also knows that we are going into a precarious situation. We're getting near the end of the operational limits of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, right? I think we're at 299 million barrels at this point. 270 is the cutoff, right? Otherwise, the armed forces has no fuel. So the Iranians understand all of that, and they know they're going to make Trump pay. But how can Trump gain? I mean, it's almost like the Iranians want him humiliated. I think he would rather invade than be humiliated. I think Robert Pape said that too, right? The last step of the escalation trap is that your ego cannot take what the reality of the world is delivering. Therefore, you go to the end. And the only two escalations he has now, ground forces and atomic bombs. And that's it. So Iran can demand anything they want, and they're probably going to get it.
I was muted. There was a report that Dan Kane, according to CNN, was telling Trump that he was advocating for an off-ramp, but also telling him, so Dan Kane's position as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, his position is to tell Trump the military options he has. He can give his advice, but also give him the military options available. And according to the CNN report, he said, look, air power alone will not work.
Of course.
So there's two paths for this, either ground operation or just walk away. Now, if walking away means accepting a deal like this, that's, despite the munitions, etc., that just seems like an impossible deal to accept, assuming this is not a negotiating position. So are you still worried there could be a ground operation? Like, is that a genuine concern, as suicidal as it sounds, or no? Like,
no. It's way too much. When you have General Kane coming in, now don't forget, General Kane was a guy who was selected from 2 stars below the rank he should have had to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Trump brought him off of retirement back on active duty simply because this guy wore a campaign hat, allegedly, and said when the first time he met Trump, "I'm willing to die for you, sir." Well, he's apparently not willing to sacrifice the lives of his men, which is a sign of a good leader. And when they had this Camp David conference last week, they had this big discussion that what are our options? What can we do? Can we have a ground campaign? Can we have the hardest campaign bombing since World War II? And I guess General Kane was asked. And once he's asked, he's obligated as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to give him his opinion and the truth. And he apparently said, we are out of options. The only options you have right now, air, can't do it. Naval, can't do it. Blockade, you can go on for a very long time, impacts the Navy more than it does the Iranians. Ground option is your only option. You don't do it, right? Not can't do it. Don't do it. There's a big difference. Otherwise, you will see casualties in the hundreds of dead, if not, if it's a long campaign, thousands of dead. The question is Trump willing? Because I think this crisis is going to go past the midterms. The Iranians, it's in Iran's interest to get Trump as damaged as possible. And they know all they have to do is drink another cup of tea, as I like to say, and just sit still, exercise strategic patience. Every time Trump does something, in response to Iran's provocations, like striking the 3 ADNOC tankers this last week or getting the Yemenis to launch ballistic missiles into Saudi Arabia. They're wanting Trump to hit them because every time Trump uses force, if you notice, it pushes this negotiations back 2 to 4 weeks. 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then the talk of, okay, they're ready to make a deal comes up again, right? And then Trump starts threatening. But here's the hard lines that I think Trump is going to have to truly accept in any deal. U.S. military forces are never setting foot back in the Persian Gulf. This is the end of freedom of navigation. And
That's crazy
freedom of navigation, though, was because all sides recognized the benefits of having ships pass through. Now, Persian Gulf is turning into an Iranian lake. It's theirs. And they have the capacity to enforce that, to enforce it. And this is a good thing, as it's going to give the Gulf states a little bit of a breather. Because I'll tell you, defense-wise, I just saw this report that the Gulf states have placed orders for 5,250 PAC-3 interceptors, right? U.S. anti-ballistic missile interceptors. Yeah. I did the basic math. It would take 8 years before they could start delivering those. 8 years. So whatever happens in the next 5 to 8 years, 5 years if the United States stops accepting interceptors for the U.S. Army and only accepts them for the Gulf states. They only produce 600 to 620 missiles per year. Not THAAD, Patriot, right? And the Gulf states aren't running THAAD. The U.S. is running THAAD. So whatever happens here,
Saudi's PAC-3s are 86% depleted. You see that? According to Reuters. 86, Malcolm.
Didn't the Ukrainians tell us that in the first weeks of the war, that they were blitzing off 3 and 4 interceptors at drones and things, and the Ukrainian shooters were going, what are you doing? One missile, one shoot, right? And they were going 3, 4 at a time. 800 U.S. Patriots were fired off in the first 3 days of this war.
That is crazy. That is so crazy.
Ukraine fired off 450 to 500 in 4 years of ballistic missile attacks every night for 4 years. So the Ukrainians are obviously much better. Yeah, it was like, yay, this is fun. Let's just shoot off everything we have. It was a fireworks display. It wasn't.
Malcolm, it's just so hard to fathom this. It's so difficult to understand how we could get here, how they could waste all the Gulf, not only Saudi. According to Reuters, all the Gulf are in a similar situation, and the US in a similar situation. There's apparently disagreements between EUCOM and CENTCOM and other command centers about the munition depleted. I think EUCOM didn't want to send certain assets to CENTCOM because they want to make sure they protect. I think the general said we want to make sure we protect US interests or US bases rather than focusing on Israel. I think that was a statement, something along those lines.
Ooh,
You know which statements I'm talking about?
Yeah, but that's a fireable offense. I certainly hope that wasn't, General what was his name, who just got fired?
Yeah, I think,
Cavazos.
Oh, there was another one today that got fired as well. Maybe that's the one you're talking about. The one
from UCOM. He was retired 2 months early.
Yeah. Bloody hell, you're keeping up with everything.
It's a full-time job in my house.
Yeah, you think that's related to the whole saga with the munitions?
I think it's related to the saga that Pete Hegseth hates Europe and Trump hates Europe, and I think that they won't even replace this guy they'll probably replace him with a 1-star. They do not care about the defense of Europe. They want, as much trouble there as possible. But, a good commander is going to look out for his mission. And if his mission is to support his European allies, and your commander-in-chief hates your European allies, you're always going to be against the commander-in-chief. So it's as simple as that. But we don't have the capacity. The Gulf states don't have the capacity to fight this war again.
I'm just speechless. I'm just speechless how it got here. And then you look at, I have different guests telling me about America's capacity and the military capacity. shipbuilding capacity.
Zip.
Exactly. There aren't they? Aren't they delegating the manufacturing of the icebreakers to Canada and
Finland.
Denmark? I think Finland. But and these are two countries that are probably not too happy with the US and with Trump right now, considering what Trump is doing with Greenland and
Mhm.
with Canada. But like, how's that normal? How like it's like the military is so flawed, is so bloated that it's become beyond inefficient. It's just become dysfunctional in a way. I had another guest, my co-host, Brandon Wycott, was telling me, and he did a
Yeah.
whole piece on it, that the ability to repair submarines has been completely degraded. That so much so that there was a submarine that needed repair or refurbishment, whatever you call it, and I think repairs, and they couldn't repair it in time, so they had to dispose of the submarine. I don't know if you know about the story, but
Yeah.
he's telling me, Mario, the U.S. military's got so many flaws across so many different layers. It's pretty alarming.
Well, I'm going to clarify that for everybody. It's not the U.S.
Please.
military, okay? It's the priorities of giving the defense industrial complex channeled and isolated, we're not going to put it, siloed areas of expertise. Iron Boat and Groton are the only two places that can repair and build submarines. That's it. Instead of saying, hey, listen, we're going to spread this out among 6 major shipyards. We're going to spend an enormous amount of money to keep your technical skill, a West Coast submarine build out base, right? Also, you gotta remember something. Our boats are not cheap and they're not easy to build. They are nuclear powered. It requires technical expertise, but we're not China, right? We can't go out and just hire 5,000 welders who are all qualified. We don't even teach welding anymore. You got to go to a private technical school or go to the military to learn these skills, right? And then you may not be up to the standard that's needed up there. Another thing is businesses don't like paying their employees the money that they deserve. So they would rather close shipbuilding and pay dividends off to the the shareholders, the investors, than to allow the people who can build boats to go build boats. And then when you lock it in Groton, Connecticut, or you lock it in Norfolk, Virginia, and you don't allow any competitor to build it. I mean, if I had my way back in the oldie days, right? I said this about Army logistics. I had this crazy story happen to me during Desert Storm. During Desert Storm, I needed bandages. So I went to a mobile army hospital that was nearby us. Everybody in that unit was above the age 60. They had all been in Vietnam. There was like 1,000,000 combined years of experience. And they saw me and they gave me this massive box and they just filled it with bandages and this. And they were like, if anybody gets hurt, you bring them to us. And I was like, I had a note in my pocket that said, if I'm injured, I am to be taken directly to this hospital. This MASH, right? To no other place, right? This wasn't a MASH, but it was a mobile army hospital, and it was great. Fast forward to Iraq. I get into Iraq in 2003, 2004. Everything was that the U.S. Army did in Desert Storm was subcontracted to contractors. So, for example, I wanted to get a case of MREs. In the U.S. Army, all I had to do is walk over to a logistics unit and say, hey, can I, use my card? Can I sign for, a case of MREs? Can we get a pallet of MREs? The MRE pallets break. Can we have the spares? It would have been absolutely no problem. I got a truck signing for it. It was spare. They were like, take it. Deserts, when I went to Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom, I could not get a bandage from the U.S. Army hospital in the Republican Palace. They had nothing spare. Everything was outsourced to contractors. If you needed food brought up to you, Kellogg Brown and Root had to bring up convoys from Kuwait, and they were getting paid 20 times, 30 times what the U.S. Army could have done it for. The entire U.S. Army Logistics Command has virtually no soldiers in it. It's all Army civilians and Army contractors. For example, why the Iranians blitzed Port Ashweba and hit the building that they called the Amazon of the U.S. Army, it was all civilian contractors. It was Halliburton, right? These guys were there. What are the Kuwait Logistics? Kuwait Logistics is the name of that company. They've destroyed all the U.S. Army spares in there. Guess what? No merchant ship can come through the Strait of Hormuz to replace that. It would all have to be flown in at
Oh,
20
wow.
times the cost of it. So what I'm getting at is the army that existed between the end of the Vietnam War and at the end of Desert Storm was self-sufficient. The Navy had naval shipyards. Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, where I was born and raised, right? Raised all around those ships. And that shipyard was sold off and decommissioned. If I were Secretary of Defense, I would go, every major shipyard from World War II is getting reopened as a U.S. Navy shipyard. Everyone's getting hired as U.S. Navy employees, not contractors. I would break the defense contracting world because that's what Eisenhower warned us about, right? The military defense complex. This is why China, the government tells corporations to open a shipyard and to open 6 of them, and you will start building this frigate. Now, that sounds top down because it's a communist country, but we got Trump out there, taking 10% cut out of Intel. That doesn't go to the U.S. Treasury, as far as we know. Seizing the oil in Venezuela, $14 billion no one can find. Right? So how are we not able to build a frigate? We spent 8 years trying to bid for the Constellation class frigate, and Trump canceled it because it was based on an Italian design. And it's an excellent frigate. The Italian frigate was awesome. Well, we should have started buying those long ago. But because it's those naughty Italians, he didn't want to have anything to do with it. So what did he do? He canceled it. Now we've got to start another 8-year competition. But now he's recommending maybe the Japanese should be involved in this, maybe the South Koreans. This is payoff. So we hurt ourselves. Mao Zedong and Karl Marx said it, Stalin said it. Khrushchev, you will bury yourself. We don't have to do anything. You'll destroy yourself from within. Capitalism as a system is based on money. It is not based on the good of the people. And it is an anathema to the Constitution itself, which is why you have these rich tech billionaires, the top, the 4 South Africans of Silicon Valley, who hate democracy in the Constitution, want to create their little tech bro universes. With a tech bro CEO, and that's what they think Trump is. So long as this fundamental view of the United States that it's not the armed forces, it's not even the procurement system, it's that Congress has channeled everything into, okay, if we built these 4 littoral combat ships, right? These ships that turn out to be crap shit ships that have no capacity to defend themselves. We had 3 in the Persian Gulf. They brought them out, sent them off to Singapore for the entire length of the war for the most part. They built them in 5 or 6 little districts, but, that was almost like a little gimme. Here's a little cash for you, a little cash for you. A good president would come back and use that executive power to say, hey, Lytton, you guys can't build these ships fast enough. I'm reopening, Mare Island shipyard at the tune of $10 billion. And that will be a U.S. Navy shipyard that will do its own work with its own people for the U.S. Navy. And you guys can bid against us, right? And you'll lose because we're always going to be the lowest bidder. And you got to incite competition. That's why we suck at this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was going to ask you about Israel because that's the main story, and I'm like, I can get into this military conversation to try to make sense of how we got here for the rest of the interview. But I wanted to ask you about a report that came out of Channel 13. Israel is preparing for the possibility of independent military action against Iran if the U.S. pulls back from further escalation. The IDF is maintaining plans to strike Iran without U.S. participation as Washington increasingly explores a diplomatic off-ramp from the war. And that comes after yesterday you had the energy minister say, we are not committed to any agreement that doesn't fully guarantee Israel's security. Even if the US and Iran reach an agreement, if Iran acts to renew its nuclear program or advance its ballistic missile program, we will attack. So first question is bluff, or do you think Israel could really attack when the US failed with Iran in this war? Do you really think Israel could attack without American support?
Yeah, we've been saying this since the end of the first phase of the war. After 40 days, it was becoming clear that Netanyahu was really upset with the MOU. He was upset with the whole U.S. taking the off ramp and not wanting to do any further actions. And again, we still don't know what happened in that conversation with Netanyahu 25 days ago, where he met before the war restarted and he told Trump, "This is the happiest I've ever been." Right? So Israel, I've educated all of you about this before. I learned this lesson the hard way in 1983. Israel looks out for number one, and they look out for number one alone. And anything that is cooperative is merely coincidental.
But what can they? But Malcolm, what can they do militarily if they're looking out for Israel? Is getting into a war with Iran that has proven its efficacy with this war? If the US couldn't beat Iran, what is Israel going to do without American support? Do they have the capacity?
They're all about decapitation at this point. All they're going to do is try to kill leaders where they find them. They don't have the capacity to wage war the way we would. I mean, what are you going to do? You can't land troops over there, right? The Israeli army as a ground force is enmeshed in Gaza and Lebanon. There's, all you can do is use air-launched ballistic missiles and airstrikes and, bring that down. And when that's going to end? That'll end with the first Israeli pilot captured, right? Forced frog marched and
but would they be able? But wouldn't they worry about the Iranian retaliation? If they flood them with missiles?
Well, all you're going to get is the war of the cities. It's up to Iran to figure out what is the capacity of Israel to keep shooting down our ballistic missiles. Do we have enough? Because Iran won't hit the Gulf states. They might, they might threaten Abu Dhabi. They might say, "Hey, you guys, y'all gonna have to cut those relationships with the Israelis, or get out of the Abraham Accords." But they won't hit the Gulf states. They'll say, "Hey, this is between us and the Israelis," and it'll just be. Here's where things are funny. I don't know if you've ever been to Israel, but Israel's very small. It's a very small country. You can zip around it in a matter of a couple of hours, end to end, and. Iran has the capacity to make every Israeli worry about their survival. They're not going to all die, but you just don't know where the stuff's going to come down at. Things are going to hit. It's like it will be like the Israelis will be living in Ukraine, Kyiv, Ukraine. Every day, every night, something's coming for you all day, all night. The Iranians have that capacity. Now, question. The Iranians know that we have a limited number of interceptors. So if they fire them on that ballistic arc past Jordan, they know that the United States will run out of its capacity to defend Israel. So maybe part of that strategy would be, let the Israelis hit us. We'll empty the entire global THAAD capacity for the United States.
Unless, is it possible the US would not defend Israel if Israel begins a war?
No, because you when those things start arcing down over Jordan, you got to figure out, it's only a matter of a degree whether it hits Muwafaq al-Salti or whether it's going to hit Ben Gurion. So no, the United States will be forced to do it. And don't forget, we have ships that are armed with the SM-6, anti-ballistic missile system. Will Trump keep those parked off of Haifa, parked off of Ashdod, providing ballistic missile defense against Israel? Those are also, they're not running short, but they're hard to replace, right? You got to reload at sea or you got to pull into port. This isn't an easy game, but Iran clearly understands the logistics of projecting power from the United States in the defense of Israel is not as easy as Trump was led to believe.
What do you make of that defense treaty between Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi?
Yeah, I call it Saturkpak. Saturkpak is a very interesting event. And
Saturkpak.
Yeah,
what does
Saudi, Turk, Pakistan. Saturkpak. And I find this fascinating because it's sort of like a little micro NATO that they've set up there.
Even the foreign minister, the Turkish foreign minister, called it NATO. He said, we want the article of the treaty, the defense pact is the same as Article 5 of NATO.
And it's really about Iran not threatening Saudi Arabia with ground force. I kept saying this the whole war. Iran's conventional forces and its asymmetric forces were not the ballistic missiles and the drones. The card they never played was the Iranian Revolutionary Guard amphibiously landing, which happened in 1987. It was going to happen in 87. Amphibiously landing and just physically occupying parts of those countries to where you now have to bring in the ground combat phase, airstrikes, all these, go tactical, which would take the heat off of them. But that's real bodies dying, right? That's real human beings dying by the thousands. And Iran never played that card. And they have a better, tell you the truth, they have a better capacity to take Kuwait and hold it the way Saddam Hussein couldn't. Because they have the Iraqis on their backs, siding with them to a certain extent. So this Saturpak, organization, which I've been an advocate. I've talked many times about how there needs to be, is the Gulf Islamic Treaty Organization, the GITO, and they need to
But
create the
it
same
happened
thing.
so quickly. Like we were just talking about it 2 months ago, and it happened already.
I think that this is Mohammed bin Salman effecting this at the head of state level and saying to Pakistan and Turkey, hey, we're the three biggest Sunni nations with the most capacity around Iran. If you would like to see the land of the two holy shrines occupied by the Shia someday, y'all might want to get on board this. Why don't we have a Article 5 level thing so that this isn't about Saudi Arabia getting attacked with ballistic missiles, because they're going to have a gradated scale for that. This is going to be about Saudi Arabia having, oil refineries blown up, amphibious landings, things like that, oil rigs taken to where Turkey, what will Turkey do? Fly to Saudi Arabia and provide troops? Pakistan already provides troops and air defense to Saudi Arabia. That's not very good. They're guardians of the two holy shrines, the Pakistani army as well. These are all prestige things, but now you're talking about putting rubber to the road, where you may have to bring Turkish army forces down there. I personally believe that Qatar is going to be signing one of these with Turkey too.
Yeah, they mentioned the Turkish foreign minister also mentioned Egypt.
And Egypt. Oh, Egypt coming into the pack. Yeah. I said this on my show yesterday.
It's also about
only group not involved yet.
It's also about Israel as well, no? Long term.
No, it has nothing to do with Israel.
Really? Really?
Nothing to do with Israel.
Oh wow, okay. I didn't expect you to say that.
You think the Israeli army is going to invade Saudi Arabia? They don't have to. I mean,
Yeah, but you don't know what happens in 10 years' time if it could be with Turkey.
Don't forget, this goes both ways. Okay. There's been a lot of talk by ministers, in Israel about taking it to Turkey as viewing them as the longest range threat. Well, now Pakistan and their nuclear umbrella covers them, right? Saudi Arabia covers them. And here's another thing. Does this pact secretly allow those three countries, or two out of those three countries, to work with the third to develop atomic bombs of their own? Oops. Sorry. You got to think long term with these guys. It's not just about, flying a couple of guys in and having the Camel Corps patrol around Mecca.
Do you think Pakistan would get involved in if Iran attacks Saudi? Do you think Pakistan would actually get involved, considering they have good relations with Iran and the Turks as well?
Well, the Iranian counterbalance. Here's how the Pakistanis think about everything. They think about everything that goes on in their region with relation to India. They don't care. They don't care two flips about Iran. It would be nice having Iran on their side, right? But Iran's a Shia Muslim nation, 15% of the Islamic world. Pakistan has a huge Shia population there as well. But they're, Sunni nation, and their complete alignment is towards China up in the Karakoram, and India up in the Jammu and Kashmir. All right. Been to both places, by the way. And them guys are serious about keeping their terrain. And they hate India with a white hot passion. And they keep a weather eye on China. So is India. India also has clashes with the Chinese. So all of them, because we're talking parts of the Himalaya mountain range. In China, if they had their way, they'd take the whole damn thing, right? From Nepal, from Bhutan, all the way over to Nepal, all the way through the Hindu, through India down to the Hindu Kush of Pakistan, right? If China had their way, they'd flip all of that. But they are looking at each other, and that's what those atomic bombs in Pakistan are oriented towards India. They're not oriented towards Iran. But this gives them a lot of leverage with Iran to play a middleman. But I don't think Iran has any designs on toppling Saudi Arabia. However, that is a 1,400-year beef between the Shia Islam and Sunni Islam that Iran, the Islamic Revolution often talked about, liberating the land of the two holy shrines and getting the second Islamic fitna resolved in favor of Caliph Ali
Oh my
returning
God,
to
man.
Mecca. So that's historic. I mean,
Trump really messed things up in the region.
oh my God, yeah, he's ruined
More
things.
than anyone could imagine.
Who is it? It had to have been one of your guests, but Iran is now, and I've said this before too, Iran is now a regional superpower.
Yeah.
Israel has shown the limits. Threatening Iran with atomic bombs from Israel does not work. But it may put Iran onto an emergency path to building an atomic bomb. And if they get that, I've said this several times too. Don't build one, better build 5. Detonate one, right? And then let the world know you got more than 5. Play a shell game, because Israel will be wanting to come after wherever you are with a ballistic missile with an atomic bomb at the other end of it.
Brandon also told me that Israel has 6 Dolphin-class submarines and 4 of
Yes.
them are not at the port. Is that true?
Yeah, well, they should be deployed anyway. You're at war. Dolphin-class submarines, well, I'll tell you where they're not, because to get to where they got to go to be a threat to Iran, other than launching their, sea-launched, cruise missiles, they would have to go through the Suez Canal. I think there's one in the Red Sea, one in the Dead Sea, and not Dead Sea. Listen to me. That would be a mean trick, getting a submarine into the Dead Sea, and it would float. One in the Red Sea, 2 in the Mediterranean, maybe 1 on deployment, and they just got a new boat, brand new boats coming in from Germany, the one that can carry ballistic missiles.
And the Dolphin classes could fire a nuclear weapon, correct? That's what makes them so sensitive.
Only because the cruise missile. But you know what? You can fire a nuclear missile from Israel. You don't want it on a cruise missile. If it's going to be in a cruise missile, you're going to be launching from Fujairah. That the Israelis, would come straight up there and launch it so that you have 1 minute's warning, not 40 minutes warning, and you could shoot down an Israeli missile with a twin double anti-aircraft gun, and they got control of and evidence of your atomic bomb, right? So you don't want to use those unless you're going to total war, and at that point, your F-35s would be dropping nukes. So it's not as significant as it seems. And these boats do have to maintain operational capacity. They got to go to sea. Don't forget, these are how they insert their, Sayat 13 SEALs, commandos. I was in Haifa, saw those boats loading up with those guys one time. And, it's a special operations platform. It's a training platform. It's a missile launching platform. It's a surveillance platform. So, you don't know. One of those boats disappears. It's a diesel boat, by the way. Got to come up sometime, even if it's just a snorkel. It could be working its way around Africa, right? Coming up off of Chabahar to pick up agents and assets. That's happened before. And I personally think that's happened in the UAE at one time. Back when they were assassinating Palestinians. I was asked once by one of the heads of UAE intelligence, how do I think those agents got out of the country? I was like,
the ones that killed the Palestinian member in the hotel.
Yeah. And he was like, what? They can do that? I'm like, yeah, it's the Israelis, man. Small boat, took a dhow out into town, out into the water, picked up a boat. They're all back in Haifa eating tacos.
It's like every time I speak to you, it's like I'm watching a movie.
But you have to think. I always talk about this. I always talk to your buddy about it, right? Future war. You can't just think about the capacity that we have. And these capacities Israel has are old capacities, right? They just apply them in a more creative, asymmetric way. But diesel boats being out of port is nothing new. Now, if you had told me that there was a lot of weapons training drills going on down at the Dimona nuclear weapons storage facility, or I would like, whoa, that's a message, you know, or
Similar to
decontamination drills.
when Bibi visited the Dimona plant a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's significant, right? It's like, hey, do the keys still work, guys? You know, giving a pep talk to the guys who are controlling 200 atomic bombs. And don't forget, Iran blitzed the villages outside of Dimona just to make
As a
point.
warning?
As a warning, just to make a point. They hit them with ballistic missiles. Like,
What
yeah,
would
we know where
Iran-
you guys live.
What would if Israel fires a couple of nuclear weapons at Iran? Obviously, Iran is a massive country. How would Iran retaliate? They'll fire everything they can, everything they have on Israel in retaliation. Correct?
Iran shouldn't do a thing. It would be the world's largest humanitarian rescue since World War II, right? Because we would have to go in there. Let's say they blew up something ridiculous, did something. We shouldn't even talk about this stuff because I worked at a national nuclear command post for a short while, and we're all rabidly anti-nukes when you come out of those places. No one is in favor of nuclear weapons that has had to work within the chain or some of these, defense sites or continuity of government sites. Every person that goes on ballistic missile launching submarines are rabidly anti-nuke, right? These are the people you want. So if Israel were to lose its mind, the global campaign to disarm Israel would happen.
Yeah.
And
Agree.
what are you going to do? You're going to nuke your immediate neighbors. Radiation goes all over the place. It will be in everyone's milk within 3 days because radiation goes around the world that fast. Go back and read about Chinese above ground nuclear tests. When I was in high school, I was part of a Philadelphia Electric Company program to train high schoolers to love nuclear power. And I went to Peach Bottom nuclear power plant. This was after 3 Mile Island melted down, so they really need to do good PR. And we were at Peach Bottom nuclear power plant, and the alarms went off, radiation detection alarm. And they were like, "Don't worry about it. That's dust coming down from a nuclear above ground nuclear test China did, and it settles in. It's dust. It goes all around the world. Every nuclear power plant gets set off by it. You eat that. It's a little bit of radiation, but it's in your milk. It gets in all these things. So you don't want nothing blowing up above ground, right? Blowing up above ground, bad. Okay. Which is why when we last talked about it, I said the only option America has is seize that mountain, Pickaxe Mountain, dig down into it, drop the nuke, blow the cave tunnel entrances, get out of there and let it go off and let the mountain collapse on it. But if any dust goes in the air, the whole world's going to kick our ass. We're going to be pariahs. Same with Israel, global pariahs. Israel's not mindless. The average Israeli over there doesn't want this. It's an unspoken rule. Iran's the same way. They love their children too, as the old song went, right? The Russians love their children too. The Iranians aren't irrational. And all that smack Trump talks about, if they get a bomb, they'll destroy the world. No, we don't. That's not part of the philosophy. It's not even part of their branch of Islam, as 12 are Islams. They're not out to bring back the end of the world to see Jesus again, right? Which is in the Quran. That is that's the American evangelicals, all of whom want to bring Jesus back. So that kind of irrational, crazy talk does not help the dialogue.
I agree. All right, Malcolm. Always love the conversations. Thanks for jumping on a weekend.
All right. Take care. Enjoy this peaceful period.
I will, man. I will. Thank you. I love these acronyms that Malcolm always comes up with. What's the acronym that he used for the alliance? I'm going to start using it now. Let me see what it is. Turk, what was it? Oh, I saved it here. Saturpak. That's the Saudi, Turkish, and Pakistani alliance. I'll be live again with Larry Johnson in an hour. That'll be the last interview for the day. So I'll see you guys in an hour. Bye-bye.